I presume you're here in order to learn of Magecraft. I'll have you know, there's no room for the weak-willed in this course, and despite your best efforts, the sorcery of our time is but a fraction of what it once was in the Age of Gods. Much of the craft is established through pedigree, and the culture of mages is riddled with deception and moral depravity. That said, if you insist, I shall do my best to educate you in this miserable, yet fascinating world. In our previous lesson, I went into greater detail on the Holy Grail, both the genuine artifact and the many imitations known to have a similar function. While we're going through previous topics more thoroughly, I've realized I can provide further clarity for heroic spirits. More specifically, I aim to dedicate this lesson to servant classes. This includes the original 7 classes used by the Throne of Heroes, additions made through Holy Grail Wars, and the many bizarre classes encountered by the Chaldea Security Organization. We'll be looking at what rules bind them, as well as the ways in which those rules are broken. Fundamentally, all heroic spirits are the product of our planet interfacing with Akasha to record important figures and legends throughout history. These records exist in a compilation known as the Throne of Heroes, which exists outside the flow of time. The world keeps these records so it can summon famous heroes to protect humanity and the planet they inhabit. Specifically, the aspect in charge of this process is Alaya, which acts as the planet's counterforce. For as profound as this seems, it is also ironically cyclical. Servants are required to fight against the beasts of humanity, which also happen to be a kind of heroic spirit. On top of that, mages have hijacked this summoning system for their own goals, paving the way for other alien intruders to interact as servants. In order to partake as a servant, candidates must either be famous enough to get recorded automatically, strike a deal with the planet to become a counter-guardian, or ascend to power over the span of time through immortality or reincarnation. While the vast majority of servants are human, they can be classified by different attributes according to their fundamental nature. Those of the human trait are extraordinary humans who are lauded among the wider population. They exist for the people, by the people. Only the most glamorous of them bring hope to mankind, attaining the star trait. Their fame is specifically catered toward paving a bright future for humanity. In contrast, there are servants with the beast trait, who represent the 7 sins or aim for humanity's downfall. Some servants are heroes of the land or of Earth itself. They are often born with some tie to nature, or literal agents of nature, such as fairies or phantasmal species. Plenty of servants are worshipped as gods with a heavenly attribute. They are classified by their divinity and often need to reduce their power to fit into a servant's container. To that end, it's worth noting that servants are not simply reincarnations of an original hero. Rather, they are a type of magical being that emulates a hero's attributes. No matter how weak or strong, heroic spirits are, for lack of better words, spiritual cores jammed into a container with specific limitations. Think of servants existing as a set of pre-cut molds. You can fill these molds with different substances, but at the end of the day, those substances can only take the shape their mold grants them. Our studies indicate that, by default, there were originally only 7 classes a servant could be summoned into. The first 3, Saber, Lancer, and Archer, are known as the Knight classes. Saber is a class designated for melee fighters. Candidates for this class need not have any talent for Magecraft. To compensate for this, sabers are often resistant to magic, allowing them to get in close to attack with large bursts of energy. As the most notable sabers happen to be chivalrous knights, it is also common for them to possess an aptitude for riding, despite there being a completely separate class for riders. Lancers are perhaps the most straightforward class. They are akin to sabers in that they fight with melee skills, but their use of spears and polearms allow for a wider range. Lancers also possess a resistance to magic, but lack the saber's iconic riding skill, perhaps because they're already agile on their own. Archers have an incredibly broad class that not only includes bowmen, but also any servant specializing in some kind of projectile-based attack. They are often meant to be scouts, and to accommodate that level of freedom, archers possess an independent action skill that allows them to remain materialized for a longer time without their master's mana. Because of this, archers are sometimes considered less trustworthy, more likely to betray or oppose their masters. The remaining 4 classes are known as cavalry classes. Riders are, as you'd expect, servants who primarily rode famous mounts during life. What qualifies as a mount can be vague, accounting for motorcycles, airplanes, animals, and even magical creatures like dragons. Similar to the riding skill possessed by sabers, riders are able to take the reins of any vehicle, even if they've never actually trained with it. Many riders are difficult to identify, as their mounts may only emerge when activating their noble phantasms. At all other times, they'll fight using weaponry seen from other classes. There are many great sword, lance, and bowmen summoned into this class, even though they might be better off as one of the knight classes. In that regard, rider is one of the more lenient classes. Given the prevalence of Magecraft throughout history, it's no surprise that there's an entire servant class for casters. It is often considered the weakest class, given how many other classes have magic resistance. To compensate, caster servants tend to be far stronger than ordinary mages, either channeling spells from the Age of Gods or using spells embellished through legend. Even so, casters typically need to think outside the box to defeat their opponents. Rather than a frontal assault, casters tend to employ indirect tactics. For instance, casters excel at territory creation, establishing well-fortified workshops where they can safely scheme. They can summon familiars to fight on their behalf, and in extreme cases, they can even summon their own servants. Casters can also create magical tools, which can be handed off to other users. Among all the classes, casters tend to be the best support servants, making them ideal for fighting in teams. Assassins are the exact opposite, excelling on an individual level. Initially, this class consisted exclusively of incarnations of Hassan Isaba, from whom the term Hashashin originally derived. Now, all manner of heroic spirits can fit this class, allowing them to take advantage of presence concealment. Even if their stats are low, assassins can sneak up on their targets and win through stealth. The final cavalry class is Berserker. These mad warriors are often known for their lack of sanity, but they also include heroes who choose to trade their sanity for a boost in physical might. They are a Holy Grail War's wildcard, because even though they are often the strongest fighters, at least in terms of brute strength, they are the most difficult to control. The extent of a berserker's insanity tends to vary, with some lacking all reason and speech, and others merely having a spontaneous personality. It is by far the most compatible servant class, as otherwise ordinary heroes can be brought to insanity during an incantation. Beyond the 7 classes employed by the counterforce, there are some man-made classes mages have invented by altering their summoning ritual. The ruler class was designed to preside over Grail Wars, specifically those that exceed 7 participants. They are expected to be fair and impartial, refusing to take a side in the conflict they're summoned into. This includes a duty to maintain the secrecy of mystery, delivering punishment onto servants who threaten humanity as a whole. To qualify as a ruler, a hero must have no wish for the Grail, making the class ideal for saints. It's worth noting that this criteria can be overruled by altering the Greater Grail. The same is true for Avenger-class servants. Without manipulating a summoning ritual like the Einsburns did in their 3rd Grail War, you'd likely never encounter one of these heroes. Instead of their fighting abilities, Avengers are qualified due to their lingering resentment after death. This hatred can persist long after a hero has forgotten what originally made them angry. In the case of Angra Mainyu, all the world's evils, he was the target of hatred rather than a progenitor of it. When summoning an Avenger, there is often a risk of betrayal, as Avengers tend to value destruction over loyalty, but there have also been plenty of them willing to channel their hatred in a constructive manner for the sake of preserving humanity. Another man-made servant class is Faker. It is a class born from needing to summon a servant without the direct aid of a Greater Grail or other pre-established system. In other words, by imitating what the Grail can do, it is possible to summon an imitation servant. Chaldea refers to these servants as pretenders, and they consist of heroes who impersonated other famous heroes. For all intents and purposes, pretender servants disguise themselves as one of the other classes, and rather than having unique attributes of their own, they simply mimic the traits of the class they impersonate. Thus, pretender is more of a trait unto itself than a wholly unique class. There are actually several of these superficial class distinctions. Gunner, for instance, can refer to casters or archers who use firearms. Ancient Giant refers exclusively to the god Surtur, who possesses a handful of skills present in other classes. The same applies to Zeus and Chaos, who can be classified as ancient gods. Traveler is more of a descriptor of Aoko Aozaki's proclivity toward wandering than it is an actual class. Not to be confused with Pretender, we have Alter Egos. This class consists of existing servants who have split from their origin to manifest as entirely new beings. They are not merely alter or lily variants of a given hero, but rather wholly unique individuals who go on to have their own legends and exploits. While sometimes treated as its own class, Alter Ego is also a supplemental descriptor for servants who already have a different class. A Lancer, for instance, may also be considered an alter ego, even if it doesn't affect their abilities in the slightest. The Moon Cancer class primarily consists of servants made within the Mooncell supercomputer. BB, the first of her kind, developed this class to fit her own needs as one who challenges humanity. This isn't to say she yearns for mankind's extinction, but rather that she challenges humans as a means of making them stronger. Other candidates are those inhuman creatures who pledge to protect the human race. They are usually figures with a direct link to BB, either as one of her variants or as participants in the Mooncell Grail Wars. Since BB is effectively in charge of this class, she can induct other servants by modifying their saint graphs. As Archetype Earth in her own unique timeline, Arcoade Brunestud can be summoned as a Moon Cancer servant. The Vampire Slayer Ciel, for feuding with Arcoade as a rival, is also compatible with this class. That said, one of Arcoade's ascensions has her class shift to Funny Vamp, which is less of a shift in ability and more just her personality changing. As Funny Vamp, she spreads her love for humanity as a blessing. The most concerning of the extra classes is Foreigner. Put bluntly, Foreigner servants are those who overturn the laws of reality, or rather, our reality on Earth. Many of them come from beyond our galaxy or universe. They include aliens and horrifying eldritch abominations known as Outer Gods. Technically, Foreigners aren't even heroic spirits at all, but Chaldea classifies them as such for the sake of convenience and understanding. Like divine spirits, many outer gods choose to take on human vessels, meaning that we never actually see their true forms. As existences outside the domain of man, Foreigners often have the power to negate and rewrite logic itself. Your only hope in dealing with them is to appeal to the human inside. In the opposite direction, we have the Voyager class, which only applies to the servant Voyager. It is the satellite mankind sent into space, rather than a visitor from beyond the stars. As such, it represents humanity's hope instead of an ominous premonition of our destruction. There might not be any point in giving an individual servant their own class, but the goddess Circe designated this class, with the possibility of other candidates falling within its criteria. Just like the servant Voyager, members of this class are capable of independent navigation. It is an interstellar tier of the ability that archers have. Voyager isn't the only class that applies to a single hero. As of now, the Savior class is occupied solely by the Bodhisattva Shakyamuni. In this class, he possesses the charisma to empower his allies and followers, as well as the intimidating presence to weaken his opponents. Other servants may qualify for this class, but have never been formally summoned. Shielder is a class currently occupied only by servants associated with Sir Galahad. His famous shield, made from the Round Table itself, was repurposed by Chaldea for Mashu Kyrielite to use. As one would expect, the class empowers servants with heightened defenses. The final class I wish to discuss is Watcher, which consists of a single mysterious servant summoned to the true and false Holy Grail Wars. It is an unseen heroic spirit that observes the war while completely undetected. Thus, the Watcher class is special for having the territory infringement skill, which, logically, involves trespassing on the territory of others for the sake of observation. As I mentioned earlier, there are ways for servants to change their class after being summoned. By manipulating their saint graphs, often in conjunction with a change in appearance, servants gain the opportunity to experiment with different classes they might not otherwise qualify for. Because this shift is artificial, such servants don't always inherit the exact skills they should for their new class. Many servants who shift into the Berserker class, for instance, don't always fully undergo Madness Enhancement. In extremely rare cases, a servant can be summoned into 2 classes at once. This process, double summon, has the servant manifest in one particular class, while also possessing the skills taken from another. In summation, servants are not simply heroic spirits given a second life. Rather than a proper incarnation, data from the Throne of Heroes is shaped to fit a predetermined container. Divine spirits, for example, must shed some of their divinity to become servants, and ultimately, all spirits are forced to adhere to the limitations and abilities of a given class. Oftentimes, any given hero can be summoned into one of several classes, each presenting their own pros and cons. These classes were originally used by the planet when summoning heroes to protect mankind, but eventually, mages and other powerful agents were able to create new classes. Many of these extra classes have unique abilities of their own, while others are just loose categories invented by Chaldea to keep track of and sort their vast compendium of heroes. Moving forward, as an extension of mystic codes and noble phantasms, I would like to dedicate our next lesson to the tremendous armory that is Gilgamesh's Gate of Babylon. Just what does he store in there, and what knowledge awaits us through all that rich history? Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all our anime lore, discussions, and Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or a YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like spicy exclusive vids and early access.
As always, celebrate your fandom. I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Trodai Connacht, Stephen Elak, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Free Brick, Olympian Doll, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Lunar Works, Link Pendrago, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Crow Calum, Saul Soto, Tristan Riggin, Major, Dionysus God of Wine and Madness, Caitlin P, Sogai CH, Vladimirovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X77, Alistair Bernadotte, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.